It really is my distinct pleasure to introduce Keith tonight, but I have a little bit more to say than just that. More than 20 years ago, FraserWood founder Peter Dixon, who was working for one of Canada's biggest lumber companies, realized that he preferred to work for himself, and he purchased a radio frequency kiln from that company with his severance pay. The kiln was drying small parts for sale to Japan, to Japanese market, I believe for the window market, but I'm not certain. And the market was apparently not meeting the company's expectations. Divining its potential to dry large solid sawn timbers, Peter visited several timber framers to see if the market was there for kiln drying large solid sawn timbers. At least two of them, the original Timbercraft operated by the legendary Charles Landau and Benson Woodworking, still located at the time in Alstead, with the day-to-day operations still under Ted Benson, committed to buying Peter's product, and thus was launched the West Coast's first timber drying service. Just 3 years later, the company began a tradition of innovation, using mobile bandsaw for planing, creating new textures, and modifying machines to accommodate larger timber members. The FraserWood team has grown in the intervening years and includes now scientists and engineers to support the timber frame professionals working with clients to design timber structures with precision. They have quite an eclectic and amazing group of people that Peter has assembled along the way. All of them wonderful to work with. That's all I can say. I did work for a little while with Peter and his team, and I was always impressed by the quality of the minds that he had around him. So some of the breakthrough innovations include the capacity to drive timbers up to 60 feet in length and 48 inches in depth. In other words, they can dry just about any timber that you can find, 48 inches in depth and that much in width as well. So they can dry round timbers as well. Quite impressive. Although round timbers are harder. And they can dry to exacting standards like 50% moisture content to the heart of the timber, and they can do this without case hardening. And it doesn't take any longer than 5 to 8 days, even if the timber is 40 feet long, 4 feet by 4 feet. It doesn't take much longer than 5 to 8 days on average to dry those timbers, which is an amazing feat when you think about it. As the business has grown dramatically and become a lot more complicated, Peter has promoted Keith Murray to his old role of sales, scheduling, primary contact person for the timber frame business. Keith, who has a knack for sales and clear communication, will be taking us on our tour tonight. So without anything further, I'm going to turn this over to Keith. And Keith, thank you for hosting us this evening.
Thanks for having me, Mac. Welcome, everybody. This is FraserWood. I'm going to take you on a tour. I'm just going to step outside now. Thankfully, the rain has stopped. So I'm going to turn us around so you don't have to stare at me this whole time. And I would say I encourage questions because this does have the feeling of walking and talking to myself. So this is Squamish on a late October day. Thankfully, we're not pouring rain anymore. So I'm just going to back up just briefly. Right now, you can see two buildings that we'll be going through of, I guess, 4. So this one we're staring at right here is the newest. We put that up last year, and we just poured a pad this past 6 months. So as Mac mentioned, FraserWood started when Peter ended up buying a radio frequency vacuum kiln. And this blue box that I'm walking towards is that very same kiln. And we can dry, in this chamber, we can dry up to 42 feet long, and we can do about 20,000 board feet per charge. And during the summer, we're kind of 3 or 4 days for that cycle to complete. And during the winter, that goes up to 7 or 8 days. And it's really just about the starting temperature. Now, one thing that's unique, I'm going to show you. So this is a load. This is a load getting ready to go in. And one thing you might notice about this load is that there's no stickers or gaps. There we go. So when we build an RF load, we have to build a solid block. You know, conventional kilns, they rely on airflow over the surface of the timber. We don't want that. Actually, when we put it in the chamber, we put the whole charge under a vacuum. And what that does is it lowers the boiling point of water. And then we send the radio waves through the charge, and they act just like a microwave would, where it's seeking out the water within the wood. It vibrates that water molecule to heat it up, and then the moisture is drawn out of the kiln. So this is still kind of the foundation of what FraserWood is based on, is being able to provide dry timbers. So this charge, or not charge, this kiln right next to it, this is a smaller chamber. This is actually out of McMinnville. This is the old Forest Grove and True Dry kilns. So we brought all of that equipment and kilns, all 8 of them. They're all up here, and this is the first one that we installed. So I'm going to show you, if I pan here a little bit. We also have this little guy, and I apologize, kilns aren't super exciting to look at, but this is a 2-chamber microwave kiln, and that one's 60 feet long, and we use that primarily for redrying when we get wets coming out of the kiln, but occasionally, you know, we get those longs that we have to put in there. All right, so this gimbal doesn't like turning very fast, so we're gonna wander into our main dry tent. And in this tent, this is where everything that's been dried, it's been dried, moisture checked, and sorted by project. This is where it gets staged, either to go to the saw, or once it's been sawn, it is getting ready to go to the planer. The way our process works, because we are in fact drying throughout the cross section, we do shrink the wood, we make it move, we twist, warp it, and that's kind of the goal. We want to do all of that before any fabrication happens. So we bring in oversized material, we dry it, then it goes to our resaw. We saw it at least on a face and an edge, so now we've got a straight and square piece, and then we can put it through the planer, and we end up with a straight, square, and stable timber to work on. So also in this building is our glulam press. And we have something locked up in here right now. This is Kel. Kel manages our glulam department, and he graciously peeled back the covers for us to have a look. It just got cold here in Squamish, so we actually, when we press, we have to, there we go. When we press something, if the temperature drops, we have to put insulated blankets over it with a little bit of heat just to make sure we're staying at the right levels so the glue can set properly. This is actually a brand new product we're doing. So new that we don't have a name for it. But this is to solve the problem of wrapping steel. We had a project, had a whole bunch of timber, but then there was also a bunch of structural steel. And while we're quite confident when it comes to heavy timber, things like 12, 14, 16-inch wide, 1-inch boards really make us nervous. So
Keith, could I interrupt you? I just want,
for sure.
Yeah, I am just so impressed with the people at FraserWood. That machine that you see behind you is not something they bought off the shelf. That was designed, engineered, and built mechanically by the folks at FraserWood. That's the kind of talent that they have working with them. And one of the things, and if Keith, if you'll turn around, one of the things, and show that again, if I could ask you to do that, one of the things
Yep.
that's really special about this machine is that it's all done hydraulically. Those individual arms there are pressing on those uh, boards hydraulically. You can see the hydraulics there at the bottom of the screen, and they put this whole thing together. There's nothing else like this in North America in terms of how it operates, and it doesn't require very large drills and guys with gorilla arms running up and down trying to run the nuts in on the all thread rods that are done. This is all much more sedate operation, and it's like enormously impressive that they put this together using just the people in the shop that figured it all out. Sorry to interrupt.
No problem. We John, who did put it all together, is a pretty brilliant mind when it comes to mechanical items. So going back to what we are producing here, so these are beam wraps that we didn't know how we were going to come up with something that would end up staying stable. So after a little bit of research and a bunch of testing, throwing a whole bunch of samples outside in the environment, we came up with this, where we have a solid fur face. We're using Europly as the core, and then we're actually using slices of glulam as the backer to balance it out. And we've had great success with this. And that's what it looks like once we've sliced it up. But when it comes out of the press, it's actually this. So we make as big a beams as we feel we can lock up in the allotted time for the glue. Yeah, so it looks like it will open the door for us to, deal with wraps or wrapping steel when we don't have a good solution otherwise. And these will get finished planed and then get sent out, or we'll put some lock miters on it. So we're doing some laps here, but I want to show you one of the main reasons we started pressing glulams was this product we call grain match glulam. And this is one here. And this is you can dry it, either straight or, but it means now we get timber that it started out with.
Keith, we lost you for about 20 seconds there, when you got to the looking at the end of the timber. We lost you at that point. So.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yep. Yeah.
Perfect. So in this case, we take an oversized box heart timber, we slice it up, we dry it, and then we press it back into the either straight or curve, depending on what we require. And you get glulam strength with the appearance of a timber. And then I'll just show you, because we like our jigs here as well. So when we go to make something like this, we need to lay out our press. And what we do is we get these jigs cut up like little puzzle pieces, and they act as both our layout grid and our go no go, so we can tell if we get any spring back or how much trim we need to make to deal with that spring back. All right. So that's some of the gluing we're doing. Now I'm going to show you, I'd mentioned that all our dry timber ends up going to the saw where we square it up. This is our saw bed here. We have 80 feet of bed. The saw can handle up to 28 inches, although you're pushing your luck if you do that. On this same bed, though, we also have a circular saw. So if you look up here, we can use this saw for either kerfing or to put a circular sawn texture on timbers. And then one other piece of equipment we have here, this is a single head planer. It's a beast, and it can plane up to 32 inches wide in one shot. So as a general rule, it comes off the saw and then it gets ready to go to our production planer. And this is our newest production planer. I'm not going to get too close because I think I lose Wi-Fi if I do. But this four-sided planer can handle up to 12 by 24 inches in one shot. All right. So now we're going to go into our main shop. I may lose you just for a few seconds here. Okay. So this is the main shop. This is where all the fabrication happens. So anything that's going onto our CNC machine, handwork, texturing, that all would happen in this shop. And when I started here almost 16 years ago, everything was in this shop. It was Hundigger at the far end, planer in the middle, saw at this end, and little bit. One of the newest is sander.
Keith, I'm sorry to interrupt you again, but we lost you at saw at this end, planer in the middle.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. So this is our newest piece of equipment. This is a single-sided sander, and we can sand up to 48 inches wide, although we haven't tried it, but we have the ability to. And we're not using it to change the size at all. It's literally just to put a finish sanding on it, because finishing has become such a part of fabrication decks. Through that door, I should note, we do have a high efficiency burner here. So all recapture and heat for our conventional kilns.
We lost you there we have a high efficiency burner.
Oh, okay. I was just saying that we capture all of our wood waste and we burn that in order to reduce the amount of waste, and it's used to heat the shop as well.
And Keith, this is an old railroad maintenance shed. It came with
Yeah,
this great big open space and those overhead cranes.
you can see the tracks on the ground there. Yeah, the cranes are pretty useful.
Yeah, it's on a brownfield site.
All right. So before we wander down to the other end, I'm going to attempt to show you our new staining tent. And Mac, please just shout in my ear if I start to glitch. I'll try not to go too far.
Well, that's a lot of light, Keith. Wow, very bright.
Yep. So this is our staining tent, and basically, in order to have a fabric building that maintains an appropriate temperature, we had to insulate it and then put in decent lighting so that we can stain in here and know that we're producing what we're saying we're producing. And this is the one where we just poured the pad maybe in the last 6 months. So it's also used for test fitting now that we have. It is the flattest surface we have at FraserWood.
Do you test fit much, Keith?
We test fit any trusses that are going out, anything complicated. And then we have projects where we're sending trusses assembled.
What's the dimensions of that space, Keith?
We are looking at between 200 and 240 feet long. And then I believe we're just counting the posts. I think this one is 60 feet wide.
How much would you estimate you have under roof, Keith?
We're between 70 and 80,000 square feet.
Do you have enough room?
There's never enough room.
I love that answer.
Well, we're just, every chunk of square footage we're taking also reduces yard space. So we're finding we have to be more and more efficient with our use of space in order to take on larger projects and get projects out.
Is that floor, has it been ground level, or what's the texturing on the floor it looks like? Is that just sweeping?
That is just sweeping. Yep. It was one of the, I hadn't seen them pour slabs of this size before. Just, it's not part of what I see. But they had these laser sensors going the whole way, scraping as they were moving from one end to the other to make sure it's all level. I'm going to show you, just because we're on the finishing side of things, on these racks, this is a project that it had a timber structure, but they also wanted timber siding. And call it 20 to 30,000 board feet went into the siding, about 800 parts. I would say 700 of them were different. And it was, I would say a third of them had a taper to them. It was the most complicated siding we've ever dealt with. And then to make it even more challenging, it gets 7 coats of stain, one tint, 3 coats of epoxy, and 3 coats of polyurethane. So this was one of the projects that really established a need for our own dedicated space to staining.
You have to dress your people up in those hazmat suits, don't you, Keith?
Like safety vests.
No, like those white polypropylene
Oh,
suits and
just when we're in the actual spray booth. So that was another thing. We ended up having to buy we call it a bouncy castle because it looks just like a blow up bouncy castle, but it's actually a blow up spray booth. Just not part of the tour. So now we're back in our main shop, working our way towards the Hundegger. Got some parts coming off. Cutting some big braces.
that's a planer right there, isn't it, Keith? Right to your right, what you're pointing at right now?
Yeah, so almost everything we run with offsets through the Hundegger so that we can take a final pass through the Hundegger planer.
And you size the timber in order to be able to do that.
That's correct.
So what size timber do you start with that's going to go through the Hundegger?
As far as before it gets dried.
Yep, before it gets dried.
If we're dealing with 8x8s that net to 7.5, we're probably bringing in an 8.5. So an inch over final dimension. You can imagine as the bigger the timber, the more the shrinkage will be. So if we're looking for 8x18s, we may need to bring in even bigger than an inch over size, or we will need to bring in more than an inch over size.
Because you might be dealing with twist and or bow or something like that.
Yeah, along with, the percentage of shrinkage you get over 18 inches versus 8 inches.
So do you do the stuff that Benson Wood does? Like if someone gives a design and you just cut out all the parts that they can go and assemble, or do you just, how far do you take the wood before you deliver it?
We have a bunch of different steps. I would say on the timber supply side, we're supplying timber framers with just dried and planed materials so that they can do their magic. On commercial projects, we would take it all the way, if we're cutting glulams, we'll take it all the way to that final step where it can get put up on site. And then we also have timber framers that use us to help increase their capacity. So if they don't have the time or space or desire to cut it themselves, they can come to us with their model and we can cut that for them.
FraserWood doesn't do any timber frame, doesn't actually do any design. In other words, they don't create the timber frame design. They don't do any engineering. They're not the architects. They take a timber frame. Keith, is that right?
That is correct. Yeah. We consider ourselves suppliers and fabricators.
So you have to provide them with a design. Now they want to put it into their own machine language, and they want to finished the joinery and installed the joinery in the 3D model. They're looking for interferences. They're doing all the checking in their process. So they like to get sort of your basic design configuration, preferably in a decent 3D program like AutoCAD or D-Trix or CAD work, and then they like to add the joinery. They like to do the joinery, gets the project lead's head into the game, and they go from there. But they don't do any engineering, and they're not responsible for the design, and they're not responsible on any of the timber framers' work for the raising. That goes back to the timber framer, and the timber framer does the raising.
Exactly. And if a homeowner or a potential homeowner called us and said we wanted a timber frame, can you cut it for us? We would refer them to a timber framer to work through the project, and hopefully we'd be able to provide some timbers for them on that frame. But we wouldn't work through the design with them.
You would try to shuffle them off to a company that does use your service, though.
Yes, we would. But we want the timber framers out there, being that first point of contact. So Matt, that kind of takes us to the end of our plan.
It does?
It does, yeah.
Oh, because I thought you had a K1 up and operating.
We do. It's not operating as much as it used to, and it may find that real estate may be repurposed. So it's just not really part of the tour anymore.
Yep. Okay. The thing that you learn when you deal with FraserWood is they are very, very focused on quality, and so they have the K2, and they don't really like to use the K1 any longer because it just doesn't cut as accurately as the K2. It's an older machine. It has a lot more wear on it, and they just don't want to send any product out that is not what they consider to be damn near perfect. So.
Yep, and Kel's gluing department is growing, and he's going to need some more space. He wants to expand his press, and yeah, I think he may find a new home over there.
Good for Kel.
Yeah.
So are there any questions for Keith?
Keith, you mentioned a little bit about how you all are a manufacturer rather than designers. How do you handle the grading process for the timbers? Is that all done by a third party, or do you do some of that in-house?
So we're bringing in timbers. We would have a list. We bring it in based on a certain grade. We have, there's probably 5 of us here with our grading ticket. So we're very familiar with the grades, and we stand behind the grades, and we're kicking things out all the time because, there's timber defects, and there's drying defects, and then there's manufacturing defects. So things are getting checked pretty much at every stage. If someone requires stamping, then we would third party or bring in a third party to stamp.
Keith, could you flip that screen so we can see your visage? Thank you.
Yep.
There you go. Hey, folks, when you ask a question, kind of identify yourself so we know who you are. Who's asking the question? or write it in the chat. That's the other thing you can do.
Might say, this is Raul. That's an impressive operation. I'm glad I got to be on this to watch it. Now, forgive my ignorance, but you are in Canada proper, are you not? Or are you in Washington?
We're in Canada. Yeah, we're in BC.
Okay.
The Canadian dollar right now is still pretty favorable.
Mac, was there a question on the chat there?
Yes, it says here, how are you handling deliveries to the States? That's from Mira.
Hi, Mira. We deliver to the States all the time. So we have customs brokers that we have a relationship with or a contract with. So we're able to ship direct either to site or to your facility without any problems. So all the customs border issues are taken care of by us.
Does that put you, the customs and stuff issue, do you have any tariff kind of issues or anything that puts you less in competition with in-state sawmills and production, if there is any, besides Bensonwood?
That's a good question. We are currently subject to a 20% tariff on timber crossing the border. If it's fabricated, the tariff goes away. But the tariff definitely hurts us. But our dollar also helps us. So I think the dollar, 76 US cents equals a Canadian dollar right now. So that does offset some of the burden of the tariff.
We have a question from Jerry Lean. What's the typical lead time for an average residential timber frame project?
Say we're probably 8 to 10 if it's green, and more like 12 if it's dry. And if you get us at the busiest times, that can sometimes push out.
Do you source all of your timber from British Columbia? A question from Brian Clark.
I would say 95% is from British Columbia. A little bit out of Washington and Oregon.
How about your glulam, Keith?
It's mixed. It's both out of Canada and out of Washington.
Okay. We have a question from Urban Tree Works. Do you supply Doug fir exclusively?
Not exclusively. It's our favorite. It's the thing we're best at drying, and it's readily available here in good sizes. We do a little bit of Western red cedar. We can't dry it in our RF kiln, but you can conventionally dry it or have green projects. And then we're doing a little bit of the other cedars. We'll do some yellow cedar or AYC, and occasionally Port Orford cedar.
And you've done some hardwoods as well in the past.
And we shy away from them now. It's tricky putting stuff in the RF kiln that's not fir, I guess. So we've struggled drying hardwoods in the past, and it makes us very cautious when we're looking at projects requesting it.
Barb Colkins asks, were you talking about wrapping metal beams with the wood?
Yes, the stuff we looked at out at the press. So that would be, you know, metal columns, metal beams, anything of that nature. Those are the ones where, you know, if you've got an LVL or Paralam that you're trying to hide, at least you have something that you can be holding your wrap in place. You know, you can put screws in where and hide those. It's a little harder when you get into the steel. So we felt we needed something that would sit and stay flat.
Yeah, Barb mentions that there's more metal structural work going on in residential construction in her area. So that prompted her question. And it's probably why you guys are looking at doing this. It's must be an increasing demand that you're seeing.
We are, and we didn't have a response maybe 6 months ago as to what to do there, but it's good to see that this one is turning out successfully.
Excellent. Philip, and I'm sure everybody's thinking about this. Philip asks, is there good mountain biking there? And can he come visit?
You can definitely come visit. Yes, I think that's why half of the people work here in Squamish. We don't have an issue with retention here. I think it's coined the outdoor capital of at least BC, if not Canada. So mountain climbing, kiteboarding, mountain biking, this is the place to be. And then you're less than an hour to Whistler for the winter skiing. So come visit.
And you're pretty flexible with the with employees' work hours, and in some cases, not everybody, but in some cases, employees can.
One thing I found early on, Pete likes to play too. So you know, when there's work to be done, get the work done. But if the snow starts flying and you're willing to make it up tonight, then go have fun.
Oh, there's also some salmon, a little bit of salmon fishing in the area, no?
Oh yeah. So we're on the edge of, there's a river right here at the tip of Howe Sound where the salmon run. And it's actually, you know, twice a year we get the eagles fly here. There's maybe a couple weeks where it's just a constant stream of eagles showing up. And then, you know, maybe February, March, then they fly the other way.
Yeah, it's a really, really beautiful area, no doubt about it. Any other questions for Keith? Well, Keith, this was just as interesting as I thought it was going to be. I'd like to thank you and Peter for making it available for us, and you taking the time to do this tonight. It was very interesting and quite different than some of the other things that we've seen when we've done Talkin Shop. So the diversity, I think it's important for, you know, for all of us to see. So appreciate it very much.
Oh, you're very welcome. I'm glad we could participate. It was fun.
Great. Well, you did a great job, by the way. Good job with the gimbal. I got to figure out how that works.
It takes some getting used to.
Well, it does.
Mac, I have one further question for Keith.
Please go ahead.
Keith, on the tariff, if you source the lumber from the United States, do you have to pay a tariff sending it back after you've processed it?
Good question. No, we don't. So the important thing is we have to bring it in as U.S. goods returning, and then it's basically flagged, and we can do what we need to do, and then send it back down without paying tariffs.
Okay. All right. If no further questions, then thanks, Keith. Thanks everybody for attending, And I'm not sure when we're going to see you next. Our next presenter is going to have to postpone. So stay tuned to Weekly Guild Notes. Thanks again, Keith. Good night, everybody.
That's good.
Thanks,
Thanks
Keith.
everyone.
Thank
Good
you.
night.